This project, Tishrei by the Rebbe, the credit for it goes to Mrs. Mira Garari. If you're a Kranheitzer, she's a 12th grade Mechaneches. She had me do it with the 9th graders close to 30 years ago, a long time ago. I would come to her house, I would sit in her basement, and we would do it. I never ever publicized these classes. I was very uncomfortable doing it. I'm doing it this year. So I'm putting up the whole series. I'm going to do a different piece by each group. So in a different class here, Seminary Bays, I did the beginning of Sukkes. I'm just going to repeat basic ideas. Sukkes in Lubavitch can be divided into 3 periods. Until 1971, after 1981, and the years in between. When the Rebbe became a Rebbe, Sukkes was a very happening Yom Tov. There were at least 2 Farbrengens during the course of Yom Tov, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. Actually at least 3 Farbrengens during Yom Tov, sometimes 4. The Rebbe bring the second day Yom Tov. The Rebbe bring Shabbos on Sukkes. And the Rebbe also had a Farbrengen one night on a mic for Talmidei HaYeshiva. That third Farbrengen stopped when the Rebbe lost his mother. Now all of this changed after the famous story with Rabbi Marlow. You may know the story. The Rebbe was in the sukkah. The tables were not very, very strong, and a table collapsed on his foot, and he lay under a pile of people till the end of the sikh. He didn't want to interrupt the Rebbe. His foot was pulverized. The Rabbi Marlow had 2 feet, and the Rabbi Marlow was able to walk, and I saw him walk. It was a nes shaleh al piteva legamre. But the Rebbe said, I can't bring in the sukkah because it's too pushy. The Rebbe said, Semaya Achrayis. The Rebbe took it very personally. Rabbi Marlow was an Adam Choshev. The Rebbe took it personally. He felt responsible for what happened to Rabbi Marlow's foot. I heard once that he had one operation, and the second operation, and to put his foot back together, there was nothing left of his foot. He had so many steel rods in his leg. His wife, the Rebbe's night in the Shtak, Leben Line, she went into the Rebbe and she said, my husband had so many operations, they want to do another one. It's enough. So the Rebbe told his wife, Rabbi Marlow was a masmid nifla. He was an incredibly diligent man. He knew Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, which is a very difficult sefer, by heart verbatim, all 6 volumes of it. So he said, learn it one more time. So he learned Alter Rebbe Shulchan one more time, and the operation was cancelled. Not because the doctor decided not to do it, because it became unnecessary. So the Rebbe stopped bringing in the sukkah, and Sukkot became mamish like Bora Park. It was boring. There was nothing happening here. Nothing. Until Bar Mitzvah, you couldn't check the Rebbe's lulav either. So Bar Mitzvah was Esh Lamed Ches. So as children, Sukkot went to great adventure. It's like Pesach. He went on trips to the zoo, it was us. For about a decade. Tafshin Mem Aleph, which was Shnas Hakel, this year is 42 years later, right? Tafshin Nun Gim, Tafshin Pei Gimel, 42 years later. 7 times 6 is 42. The Rebbe turned around the first night in Shul. Not in the Sukkah. He started speaking a Sikha about Simchas Beis HaShiyev. And that started one of the most beautiful minhagim in Lubavitch, the dancing all night that goes on for the 7 nights of Sukkot. It's such a beautiful thing. It goes on to this day, and all of a sudden, a verschlossene Chag, Simchas Sukkot d'chzman Simchaseinu. For 10 years there was nothing happening, and then all of a sudden it took off like a rocket. You didn't sleep, but you danced the whole night, night after night. It became so energetic. Everybody came to Simcha Beit Hashem in the beginning, every community, and then everyone makes their own now. The Misnagdim make their own, the Chassidim make their own, every group has their own Simcha Beit Hashem. No one has 7 nights dancing till 6 o'clock in the morning. No one, not even in Eretz Yisrael. Only here. Not even in Kfar Chabad. Not even in the Kiryat Chabad in Lud or in Nachas Chabad. Only in 770 Crown Heights. The dancing is an amazing experience. And it made Sukkot so meaningful, so exciting, so holy. The girls don't get to dance. But I will say to you that if you go to that dancing and you participate, it's the holiest feeling you'll have in your life. You join with so many other people, and you get lost. You mamish forget about yourself. You have real joy, holy joy. You can dance for an hour, after an hour, after an hour. 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And slowly, even the biggest balgaiva, even the biggest, the most uptight, nervous, thinking about himself kind of guy, you forget about yourself and you join in. It's a real holy joy. Simchas Beis HaShiyev. Another big feature of Sukkot was that you get to mention the Rebbe's lulav. In the first 10 years or so, the Rebbe used to actually stand in his sukkah. You would walk into the Rebbe's sukkah, And the Rebbe would answer your brachas, Baruch Hu B'Shmei Amen, and look at you, and answer your brachas. The Rebbe would stand there in my Chassidus, and people would walk in one at a time, and make a bracha. Then the Rebbe stopped that. He gave it to Rabbi Harlig. Meir Harlig was like Zut Stark. And then, of course, in 1991, Tov Shin Nun Beis, the Rebbe walked out of his own sukkah, and he said to Meir Harlig, "The Mershon talked off Mishtein Alein," as if he'd been doing it the last 4. The first day I got to do it myself. And the Rebbe stood from 7:45 to 2:35 in the afternoon. How many hours is that? It's almost 7 hours. The Rebbe wouldn't sit. The Rebbe wouldn't lean on his stender. The Rebbe wouldn't lean on the wall. And he was 89 years old. And he watched every Lubavitcher man walk by and make 2 brachas and the Rebbe would give a shakel. That Tishrei, which was the year of the stroke, the Rebbe made a point of seeing all the children. The day after Yom Kippur, the Rebbe, all the kids to come with their pushkas and their Tzivos Hashem hats, and the Rebbe gave every child a nickel to put in the pushka. The Rebbe stood outside. The first day Sukkes, the Rebbe saw all of the men, and after Simchas Torah, the Rebbe asked to see the women again. There was a special sikha for women. And it's been noted that by the previous Rabbeim, there was such a seder. The Frierdiker Rebbe also, Tov Shin Yud, the Rebbe suddenly came out of the porch and he wanted to see all the Bachrim. The Bachrim used to say you could sit in 770 2 or 3 years and never see the Frierdiker Rebbe because of his health. And then in the winter of Tov Shin Yud, the Rebbe asked to see everybody. So Nun Beis Tisha, the Rebbe made a point of seeing everybody. The children, the day after Yom Kippur, the men, the first day Sukkos. When I walked into the Sukkah at 1:35 in the afternoon, the Rebbe's back was concave. He was like that. He was in so much pain. You could see him. But he was such an action. The Rebbe was such an action. He was so stubborn. He wouldn't lean on the wall. He wouldn't lean on the stender. He could have sat. No. Davening Shachar started at 3 o'clock. Hallel was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Anyway, so this became the feature of Sukkot, was the Simchas Beis HaSheva, and then of course there was Mivtza Lulav. The Rebbe used to speak every night Simchas Beis HaSheva Sicha in the front of the Shul. In Tov Shin Nun Beis, they got the Rebbe's permission to move his place to the middle of the Shul where he stood by Fabrengen. So they put the Rebbe's chair there, so the Rebbe should sit. The Rebbe came to his place. He says, "What's this chair? I always stand by this Sicha." So Rabbi Gordon told the Rebbe, "I know, but since we're making it like a Fabrengen, the Rebbe could sit." The Rebbe said, "No, we stand." But because the Rebbe's stender wasn't there, the Rebbe was 89 years old. There was, you don't want to say an old man, but his body was tzebrochen, yeah? The Rebbe stood probably 35, 40 minutes. Also, like shanis, holding onto a siddur, bending over the table. My back hurt from watching the Rebbe stand like that. The next night, I read they brought the stender, but that night, the Rebbe started speaking without the stender, and chas v'sholom, the Rebbe should waste 1 second, that you give him the stender, he should be able to stand normal. The Rebbe stood bent over the table for the whole time of that first night, the sikha. The next night, they already brought the stender. Anyway, now the next thing so during Chalamet Sukkos, there was some kind of a rally for children in Shul. 1 year, Lamed Zayin, the Rebbe made a Fabrengen for the children in the Sukkah. Well, and there's pictures of it, there's videos of it, you've seen it on Gem. That Fabrengen, what the Rebbe had for the children in the Sukkah, was not for all kids, it was just for the public school kids. The Rebbe used to have rallies, okay? So now, in the next generation, after mine, my bar mitzvah was 1977, okay? So, the Rebbe made Tzivos Hashem, Tashma made Tzivos Hashem. When the Rebbe made Tzivos Hashem, the Rebbe used to come and speak to the kids many times, maybe 10 times a year to Tzivos Hashem. But before the Rebbe spoke to Tzivos Hashem, there were 2 rallies. There was a rally Chanukah, 3 rallies, Chanukah rally, a Pesach rally, and a Sukkot rally. These rallies were really for the kids from the release time program. They were public school kids, would come to 770, and the Rebbe would speak to them, they would give them 2 dimes, and they would make a big event. They would have raffles, and not one Lubavitcher kid ever won a raffle. Always the public kids won every single raffle. They were rigged start to finish. But Lamed Zayin, the Rebbe made a Fabrengen with the public school children. So we were not allowed in. It was in the sukkah. They were washed, and 10 men washed with him. All the boys sat in the sukkah. They took out the windows from the shul, and the girls sat in the house, in the shul. They made like a platform. They were able to see the Rebbe. And the Rebbe had a Fabrengen with public school children, girls. The Rebbe had a Fabrengen with public school. I don't know what kind of. They spoke in Yiddish. Rabbi Hecht translated into English. Rebbe washed and benched and gave them Kedesh Bracha. He did it one time. It was a very unusual event. I was not there. But when you look at the photos and you see the children, you say, this is, how many of those kids' lives, they sat with the Rebbe in a Fabrengen, not understanding one word. For whatever time it was, an hour or 2, they were washed. spoke Sukkes, said L'chaim, the Rebbe benched, the Rebbe came Kishal Bracha. The boys were outside and the girls were inside the shul. Now, the next significant component of Tishrei to talk about is Hoshana Rabba. Hoshana Rabba Tehillim was 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was probably, I tell this to my children tell me I'm wrong, but okay, my children know better. Not only they know better what they're experiencing, they know better what I experienced. And it's probably even true. But the two most packed events of Tishrei was the first Slichas and Tehillim of Hoshana Rabba. Because if you lived in Massachusetts or Connecticut or New Jersey or New York, and you were a shliach, and you were a community, you could come to them for Rosh Hashanah, you couldn't come for Yom Kippur, you couldn't come for Simchas Torah, but 1 o'clock in the morning, your parishioners were sleeping in most places, you understand. So all the shluchim of the Arei Asada from the entire tri-state area, they came for 1 o'clock Slichas and they came for 1 o'clock Tehillim. The place was packed. There was pashut occasions where you physically could not get into the building. Tehillim was quick, an hour and a half. There's a whole controversy about how many Yehiratzins you say, whether the Rebbe did say the Yehiratzin. There's a special Yehiratzin that you say on Hoshana Rabba in the back of the Siddur. If each one of the 5 Sfarim is a different Yehiratzin, the Rebbe actually has corrections on the Nusach that are printed in the back of the Siddur. There's also another Yehiratzin which some people say, some people don't say it. I don't know how you do it, but the Rebbe said Tehillim, and that was that. Hoshana Rabba in the morning is a very long davening. It started at 10 o'clock. But you say 7 Hoshana, it takes a long time. So the Seder was like this. I told this to the other group, so I'm not repeating all these details to you. When the Rebbe came into Shul 10 o'clock to Shachris, he was not carrying his lulav. When the Rebbe came to 10 o'clock, Rabbi Meir Harlag, the Zayin Gezut, was still out in the Sukkah giving people the Rebbe's lulav. They would come to him around 11:15 when the Chazan was holding after Kedusha, Chazar Sashatz, and tell Rabbi Meir Harlag that the Rebbe is holding after Kedusha. The Rebbe needed the lulav for Hallel. So he would stop the line and he'd go inside, he would go over to the Rebbe's place, he'd put on the lulav and he'd put on the essay, the Rebbe would we'd acknowledge him, and then the Rebbe had it for Hallel, and the Rebbe kept it. The Rebbe didn't give it back to him after. The Rebbe used to walk out of Shul holding the Dal Minim. All the pictures, the Rebbe is walking out of Shul with a talus, holding Dal Minim, they're all on the way out, because the Rebbe did not come in with his lulav. Hoshana Rabba, the Rebbe came in with Hoshainus. I think he had it in his Siddur. And the Siddur was Azoy. So every day was a Hoshainus, right? How to do a Hoshainus every day? The Rebbe was up on top, by his place, on the platform. And during Hoshainus, the Rebbe would have would hold the Dal Minim. By the way, this year it's Shnas Hakel, so you hold the Dal Minim the whole Hallel, not just when you do the Nanuim, as the Rebbe did in 1987. Tafshin Mem Ches, the Rebbe said he's making a Shinui for Shnas Hakel. And every year Hakel, we do it this way. We hold the Dal Minim, the whole Hallel, not just when you do the Nanuim. And then would stand in his place and do Hoshainus. Now, of course, Hoshainus goes along with Hakafos, where you circle the bimah. So the way our custom is, for those who do not know, is each day you read one paragraph, right? And you say, whatever. The first day is about the Eibishter himself. Right? When you get to Samach, you start saying it twice. Until Samach, you say it once. When you get to Samach, you start to say it back twice. And you also make the Hakaf at that point. So the Rebbe would come down from his place, holding the Dal Minim, and this is the Rebbe never davened anything by heart. All of a sudden, he knows by heart. No one has a clue what a shyness is. Mitamah, the Rebbe knows it by heart. He would hold the Dal Minim in his hands, in both hands. He did not have a siddur. And the Chazan would go in front of the Rebbe, and they would follow him. They make one hakafa. After the one hakafa, he went back to his place, the Rebbe did, and something very unusual had happened. It doesn't happen a lot in 770. The Rebbe would finish the Nusach, which isn't very long, and they would turn around, hold the Dal Minim, and look at the crowd. If you're wondering why there are so many beautiful pictures of the Rebbe standing in his place holding the Dal Minim, because it took a very long time. There were a lot of people in Shul. They couldn't all circle with the Rebbe. So it made a circle, went back to his place, which was on the platform in the later years, holding Dal Minim and watching the crowd circle. And the Rebbe could stand for 10 minutes, as long as it took people to circle. When the crowd was finished circling, the Rebbe turned and faced the front. You would say whatever you would finish, you say Laman Das, and that was that. Hoshana Rabba, you make 7 circles. It takes a very long time. So the Rebbe would come down from the platform before Hoshanas would start, and they put a stender right near the chazan, on the floor. So you couldn't really see the Rebbe during Hoshanas. And they make 7 Hakafos. And the Rebbe went around 7 times. Each time the Rebbe went around, the Rebbe waited for everybody else to follow him. So if in a normal shul, Hoshana Rabba's davening takes, let's say, an hour and a half, in 770 it took 2 hours. Because every hakafa, and there are 7 of them, the Rebbe waited for the whole crowd to circle. Now, by the way, just to tell you a minig of Hoshanas, this year, Sukkes is going to start on Monday, correct? So in the middle of Chalamei, the Hoshana Rabba is going to be on Sunday. You're going to have a Shabbos. Shabbos, you don't say Hoshanas. Some people say Hoshanas on Shabbos also. We don't say Hoshanas on Shabbos. When you don't say Hoshanas on Shabbos, the next day, you would read 2 Hoshanas, the one from Shabbos and for the one from the weekday, but you would only make 1 circle. You understand? You wouldn't go around twice. You would read the Hoshana from Shabbos to yourself. Same way. Hoshana Rabba. Then you would say from Samach, you start saying in front and the back Hoshana, and then when it got to the Hoshana of that day, you would make a Hakafos. Hoshana Rabba could never be Shabbos. It could never be on Shabbos. And they do 7 Hoshanas. So it went 7 times around. Each time they went around, he would turn around and wait for the people to finish, then he would do the next one. So it took a while. After you do all 7 Hoshanas, then you read a bunch of pages of very hard words, right? Words that you never say, you say them once a year. You'll notice as you're saying Hoshanas that the big feature of Hoshanas, of all things, is about water and parnasa. You're davening pashat for food, for parnasa, Sukkes. When you finish all 7 Hoshanas, it's on Sunday. It cannot be on Shabbos. Sukkes, Rosh Hashanah was Monday. So Shmini Atzeres is Monday. It's always that way. The first day Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres are the same day of the week as Rosh Hashanah. So if it's Monday, so Hashanah is going to be Sunday. So the day before is not going to be a Hoshana. Hoshana Rabba, you're going to say anyway 7. When you put the Sefer Torah back, you put the Sefer away, and you close the Aron, you put the Davening down, and that's when you slug Hoshanas. You understand? If you're going to be in Shul, you finish the whole Nusach, you say Kaddish, you close the Aron, and the custom, by the way, is to say it loud. Everybody together. They put the Sefer Torah away, they close the Aron, and then you bang 5 times, and you read a Yehidot. Now the custom in most communities is you throw the Hoshanas on top of the Aron Kodesh. I don't understand that custom. I think it's disrespectful to the Aron Kodesh. In many shuls it stays there till Pesach. The Rebbe threw it on the floor. And there was a mad dash for the Rebbe's Arova. So Label Groner knew what was going to happen, so he would stand there and he would make sure he got it. And I don't think he made anything with it. He took it, somebody else should take it. But the Rebbe used to hit the Shana 5 times on the ground and just throw it down. Not put it on the Aron Kodesh, as some people have a custom. I don't know if that's a Chabad custom at all. I don't even know if that's a good makar. I had a neighbor, he came home from Shul, he threw it on top of the sukkah. So I said to him, tomorrow I'm going to throw it in the garbage. What I do is, it doesn't in Hagim. You save the Dalad Min Mazai. From the Esrig, you make jam. From the Adasim, you make Psamim. You put it in with the cloves. The Lulav and the Arava you hold and you burn it with Chametz. That's the minik. You burn it with Chametz. You're doing one mitzvah with another mitzvah. So you save the shyness also, and you burn it with the Chametz. Just make sure that the bag is open, otherwise it's going to start to stink. And by the time Pesach comes, it burns like paper. So davening takes a long time. So if davening starts 10 o'clock, the Rebbe would leave maybe 12, 12:15. And as soon as the Rebbe left the shul, they would lock the shul. Kick everybody out, lock the shul. Every bench was taken out of the building in Meine Yoram. And they made preparations for Hakafos. Okay? Girls, Hakafos in 770 was very pushy. The pressure was incredible. And there was no benches. When you have benches, the benches block, the pressure is less because people are being held back by physical features. The only features in 770 which limited the pushing were the tables in the middle of the shul, which were made of steel. They had to be very, very strong. They had to hold enormous amounts of pressure. They would empty the shul benches. 770 has long, long steel tables, which the whole year they have a whole problem where they should store it. But those tables are put in the middle of the shul. Now the Seder is, I'm going to stand up, make you a picture here. Make a little picture, okay, so you'll see how it looked. Okay, if this is 770, let's say, right? Let's say this is 770. Yeah, this is 770. So the Rebbe stands here, correct? On a platform. In the later years, they would actually physically move this platform from here to here. Okay, so if you can imagine this, so the Rebbe's platform was moved this way. And here they put a bench. People used to stand, old people used to stand from the safest spots in Shul, if you can get there, yeah? Here's the Yad Kodesh right here, okay? Now, they would draw a set of tables, steel tables, that ran the length of the Shul like this here. Oh, and then it came around like this.
Tables or benches?
Steel tables, very heavy steel tables. The tables they're narrow. They're maybe 15 inches wide.
Wow.
They're very long. They're made of one piece. Okay, like this here. The crayon decided not to work. Okay, and then it went like this. That's how it looked. The Bimas Akriya was here on the floor. Where the Rebbe lane, which usually elevated, was now on the ground. Hakafos took place in this. This was called the Ches, and this was called the Shvil. When the Rebbe got Hakafos, he would go down from his place, walk down through here, circle the Bima once, and then dance here. Okay, this was actually a pretty large area. I'm probably not making it to scale. It was probably longer, like this, let's say. Okay, and every bench was taken out of the shul. So the pressure here and here and here and here was extraordinary. There was a big beam, one of those big, hefty beams was right here, and they would chain the table to the beam. They would chain the table to the beam here and here, and it withstood all the pressure. Because until the Rebbe's heart attack, the bleachers belonged to the girls. The bleachers belonged to the girls. Beisivka elementary school girls till Bas Mitzvah were invited into the shul to participate in the Rebbe's Hakafos. The back of the shul was the girls. My sister, as a child, went into the shul and she stood on the bleachers. After the crowd became so big, there wasn't enough room for men. But the girls girls before Bas Mitzvah would be on the bleachers. I heard that even Amo, adult women, B'chlal Simchas Teire, they take down the mechitza. You know that. During Hakafos in every community, they take down the mechitza to make it easier for people to see. It was much easier for the women to come into the shul. There was no room. By the time I was growing up, the room was full of men. After Lamed Ches, the girls couldn't be on the bleachers. The bleachers had men on it. When I was a child, the back of 770 was empty. I was born in 1965. So I'm talking on 1976, 77, 78. The last third or quarter of the shul had no people. You couldn't see anyway. By 1985, there wasn't an inch. Every spot in shul was taken, whether you could see or you couldn't see. But until Lamed Ches, the girls would come downstairs, the bleachers, which don't exist anymore, so you don't know what I'm talking about. The back of the shul, where now has the platform that the Rebbe sat on after the stroke, was bleachers. The girls stood on the bleachers. Beisivka had the bleachers all the years until Lamed Ches. After Lamed Ches, they took it away from them because there was just not enough space. Okay, now the Rebbe Lechatchila stood on the ground. Then in Lamed Daled, which was the Shnas Hakel, 1973, the Rebbe allowed them to make a platform. He stood on the platform. Later years, they made a platform on top of a platform. The Rebbe's platform is about 3 feet from the ground, let's say, yeah? They took the platform of laning, which is a taller platform, it's probably 3.5 or 4 feet from the ground, and put a platform on top of a platform, which means that the Rebbe during Hakafos was so high. Did you ever notice the front of 770 on the top, there's a 45-degree angle? Know what I'm talking about? No, in the men's section. Mizrach, the eastern wall 770 isn't straight. The top comes out like this. The wall goes up and it comes out. That was for acoustics. 770 had unbelievable acoustics. My foot. But this they did. The Rebbe's stender was against that 45. The Rebbe was as high as the ceiling. It was very high up. A platform on top of a platform. So unless something was blocking you, you could probably see the Rebbe during the time he was on that stage from almost every spot in the shul. The part where you couldn't see the Rebbe, when the Rebbe danced his own Hakafos, and the Rebbe was in the middle of the shul. So Erev Simchas Teira, Erev Shmini Atzeres, they would kick everybody out of the shul by whatever time. The only way to kick them was to turn off the lights. 770 has no windows. When the lights go out, it's really, really dark, and people didn't have phones with flashlights, so people walked out. They had the same problem today. They have to empty the shul to clean it and set it up, and they would prepare the shul for Hakafos. When you came back in Yom Tif, there was basically no more benches. Just the tables in the middle that I just gave you a drawing of, and the Rebbe's bim in the front, and then of course the bleachers were in the back. On both sides, there were pyramids. On both walls, that means the northern wall, which is what you call Eastern Parkway side, and the southern wall, which is the Kingston side, there were bleachers where Bachrim stood. There was a table, and there was a bench underneath it, a bench on top. So the guys, there were times that the guys and the girls competed for space. On the Eastern Parkway side, the women's Weibishul is lower. And there were times that Bachrim standing on the table on a bench would block the ladies. The ladies were not allowed to touch the men, so they would poke them with sticks and don't ask. It became an issue. But that's how high, on both sides, there were these pyramids, there were platforms. When the Rebbe had his heart attack, they worried about the Rebbe's health. So they made new rules, no platforms, no bleachers, everyone stood on the floor. That lasted maybe 1 year or 2 years. By 1980-81, those bleachers started coming back. By Nun Bays, they were all built up again, and they were blocking the women. On Kingston, the women's windows were higher, so it never became an issue. But on Eastern Parkway, they kick off guys' hats.
And Rosh Hashanah was in Kingston, and a lady told me that there in Kingston, and
she'd knock off hats. Now we're Amo.
In Kingston, Amo.
But Amo. I think Kingston's a little bit higher. Anyway, so this was how the shul looked. So there was pyramids on all sides. The shul was empty. Ma'ariv Shmini Atzeres, let's say, starts 7:15. Let's say 7:15 starts Ma'ariv. It was uneventful. Shmini Atzeres was the most boring day of Sukkes. Nothing happened except for Hakafos. It was very, very conservative. It was the only night you slept the whole week. Simchas Torah you didn't sleep. Sukkes you didn't sleep. Shmini Atzeres went home, you went to bed. My kids go to Hakafos now. They come home 12 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in the morning. Hakafos by the Rebbe Shmini Atzeres were done by 10:15. Show was over. 10:15, everyone went home. You ate the Shabbos like a mensch, went to sleep. It's the only night you slept with Shmini Atzeres. Because the Hakafos started around 8. I'm going to explain this in a moment. And by 10:15, the whole show was over. Ma'ariv was around 7:15. After Ma'ariv, they would announce that there's going to be a break, and people should go make kiddush. Remember, Shmini Atzeres yourself to sit in the sukkah, and a Hakafos is going to be 8:30. So people would leave. Around 8 o'clock, the shul would start filling up. I'm very fortunate, and maybe also not such a nice person, but I had very good places for Hakafos. In fact, at one point in my life, I had 2 places I would shuttle back and forth, until a man said to me, I was pushing, a man said to me, you're a murderer. So I'd sit. I stopped my shuttle. I took it. It was a man who was older than I was. I now know him well. He just doesn't know that it was I that he told you're a Ritzeach. Because if he did, I don't think he'd be my friend. But I had 2 places. One place to watch the Rebbe's Hakafos near the middle of the shul, and one place in the front to watch the Rebbe the whole night. The Rebbe used to walk into shul around 8:30. Now you have to understand something very important. The Rebbe's leading of the congregation was his face. Even before he did with his hands. The Rebbe's face oozed joy. And that joy was infectious. It touched all of us. For reasons that are understood in Kabbalah, the only day in Sukkes that the Rebbe was serious was Shmini Atzeres. Sukkes was a lot of simcha. Simchas Torah was over the top. Simchas Torah was so unique. Simchas Torah, there's no day of the year that the Rebbe looked like he looked on Simchas Torah. Shmini Atzeres, the Rebbe was actually more earnest. The Rebbe once said, in one of the Siches, that Rabbeim seinen gewähnt mehr in sich, that Rabbeim were more withdrawn. In other words, Shmini Atzeres was more serious even in Sukkes. The Rebbe looked Shmini Atzeres almost like Yom Nerai. It was much more earnest. Even by Hakafos, there was a very big difference between the Hakafos and Shmini Atzeres. The Rebbe's whole face was different. Simchas Torah, he was like Melech Basada. The ultimate moshel of Melech Basada was the Rebbe and Simchas Torah. Shmini Atzeres was a very, very different mood. Now, I'm not sure about the following detail. This is true about Simchas Torah, it's not true about Shmini Atzeres. I think I told this to you, that for most of the years of the Rebbe's Nesias, when the Rebbe walked into the shul, it was quiet. Did I tell this to you? When the Rebbe walked in, it was quiet. That quiescence, I was a kid, was moving. It was eerie. It was like, wow. It was a long walk from the back of the shul to the front, and nobody budged. You stood. Simchas Torah, my father told this to me, I don't remember this. The Rebbe would walk into the shul, and as he entered the shul, the Rebbe would start the niggin himself. So the whole shul screaming, Shah, Shah, Shah. He wanted to be quiet. So the Rebbe started nigging by the door. In the 50s and early in the 60s, there would be quiet. The Eilim was smaller, and the Eilim was also much more intimate. People knew what was going to happen. Today, a lot of people don't know what the rules are. He would walk in, it would be quiet, the Rebbe would start singing again. I do not know whether Shmini Atzeres that happened or not. If the Rebbe didn't start a niggin, the Rebbe walked through a quiet shul, but it could be that Shmini Atzeres also. But Simchas Torah for sure, the Rebbe walked into the shul in the beginning of Hakafos, and he started the niggin. So the niggin came from back to front rather than front to back. And usually the Mayas, that's how the Rebbe walked into the shul. He'd walk through the whole shul, he'd go up one platform, and then in the later second platform, it was very high up. He would put a sit and immediately turn around and start to clap and dance. And the room would lift, the whole room would lift. The thing about Hakafos that I remember is it was unbelievably joyous and it was unbelievably controlled. I mean, the dancing non-stop that you see now, because nobody can stop the Bachrim, it was so controlled. It was the combination of real joy and real control was a skill that Rebbe. It was a special ability to on the one hand manage unbelievable simcha, but on the other hand, it was very, very controlled. It was very mesuded. They would turn and face the crowd, and we would dance. The minute they ever turned back to the wall, the Rebbe managed Hakafos. I told this to you also on previous occasion. The Rebbe always had a watch. But if there was a watch on the table, by the Shtender watch on the table, you didn't see the watch, but the watch was always there. Betel Yunik used to put on a watch, and right before the Rebbe left, the Rebbe, he would take the watch back. Sometimes the Rebbe would actually hand it to him. Because if the Rebbe didn't give him the watch would disappear. But the Rebbe always knew the time, and he managed the clock. The Rebbe knew how much time each Hakafos is going to be. He knew how much time he wants all the Hakafos to take. He knew when he wanted to make exceptions to the rules. But you usually start at the same time and finished. Like I said, they became in 8:30. By 10:15, the Rebbe was done. It was almost predictable. Shmini Atzeres. Simchas Torah was a whole different seder. Someone would walk in, we would immediately sing and dance, and turn to face the wall, quiet. And then they did Atahareis. Way back when, they would actually sell psukim by Hakafos. So Hakafos took very long, but 80% of Hakafos wasn't the dancing, it was bidding on psukim. It took a long time. People would raise their hands and bid and outbid each other. As a child, I remember this a little bit. After Lamed Ches, there was no more bidding. Everything, all the bids were given before. The same people were the rich. I mean, the Lubavitch didn't have that many rich people. The same people bought the psukim every year anyway. So they would come to them before, and they'd give them a price, and they'd negotiate and haggle. There was Hakafos 3 times. The night of Shmini Atzeres, the night of Simchas Torah, the day of Simchas Torah, each time was 3 Atahareis, and people used to pay for the schus, either buying a pasuk for themselves, but of course mostly wanted to buy a pasuk for the Rebbe. But in the olden days, they would literally bid by the Hakafos for these psukim. So it took a long time. And people would raise their hand, $100, $200, $1,000, whatever. All the people who were in the bidding positions, they had good spots. The Gabayah knew who they were. Where did the money go to? So I don't remember exactly, but one time I went to the yeshiva, one time I went to Merkaz Yad Chinuch, and the third time maybe I went to Machne Yisrael. The money, each Hakafos went to a different tzedakah that they raised. And the Gabayim used to keep track of all of these things and so on. There was a difference between Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. You do 3 Atahareis. Each Atahareisa, the Rebbe got the first pasuk and the last pasuk, Shmini Atzeres. Simchas Torah was different. Now there's a tape of the Rebbe saying Atahareisa. Now they have a tape from Simchas Torah, which they shouldn't have. But there was a tape from the Rebbe doing Atahareisa by the Sifterek B'Alta Mashiach. The Rebbe says Atahareisa in a very low tone. By Hakafos, the Rebbe was very upbeat. And the tone of the Rebbe was Atahareisa l'das. He would shout, Ki Hashem hu alikim, einoid milvad. The whole shul would repeat after him. So the Rebbe got the first pasuk of Atahareisa. He got the last pasuk of Atahareisa. Each of the 3 Atahareisas. And the other psukim they would give out, the Rashag, the Rebbe's brother, got the second pasuk, Chadakov got the third. It was regular people. So by the time I was growing up, 770 was already established, Lubavitch was official, and there were a lot of important people who got up psukim. The first Atahareisa finishes, so there's a lusach, it's 17 psukim. There's an avarachim, 2 small lines, and then the Rebbe would turn around, and the Rebbe would start the nigun. The nigunim of Atahareisa, the Rebbe started himself. And the Rebbe didn't have a big repertoire, 5 or 6 nigunim. Every year, the same ones. Allah selah, ufaratzta. The Rebbe had a few nigunim, 4 or 5 nigunim, that the Rebbe would start intermittently. The Rebbe liked Allah selah hochoch. The Rebbe liked Nietet Nikavo. The Rebbe liked the Shias Amecha. The Rebbe had a few nigunim, and it was always the same ones. But the Rebbe used to start, after the 3 Atahareisas, the Rebbe used to start the nigun himself.
You said there was a video of Simchas Torah?
There's a tape that came out last year that someone took. They say it's an Israeli and it wasn't Yom Tov for him. But I would bet money that was taken in Shmini Atzeres. Obviously someone who wasn't from was in 770. And you can hear the Rebbe saying the first and the last pasuk about Teresa. I told my friend that I did at Shmini Atzeres, not Simchas Torah, is because Simchas Torah, the Rebbe said all the psukim. Someone made a tape, someone who wasn't from. And it showed up a couple of years ago. And when you listen to the tape, if you were there then, you feel like you're there now. You'll hear it, you're not going to hear what I hear. It's impossible. It doesn't sound crazy enough. It sounds too normal. It sounds too normal because by the Rebbe it was very happy, very, very happy, but very controlled.
Are we allowed to listen to it?
It should not have been taken. Should have been publicized. Again, the person who took it was an Israeli. He wasn't even from. And he just gave it out, and it ended up on our WhatsApps. So last year, Simchas Torah time, we were all listening to it. And if you remember Hakafos, you feel like you're there. There's no question about it. But I don't think it was on Simchas Torah. I think it was on Hipach HaLocha. I think it was on Shmini Atzeres. From what the Rebbe says. So we start the Nigunim. The few of Allah Salahochach, Yetit Nikava, occasionally she has Samecho, Ufaratzta many times. They were like this Nigunat. And then we would start to sing, and we would all sing, and then we would clap, turn to face the wall, quiet. Second time, same thing. After the second Ataresa, the Rebbe would then turn around, he would start the Nigun, we would sing, then we would turn around, quiet. After all three Ataresas, so the Chabad added a few, the Rebbe added new Minhagim. In Tafshin Yutes, the Rebbe made Ufaratzta. So the Rebbe added that by Hakafos, they would sell V'hoya Zaracha. 3 times. And people would bid on it. And the Rebbe would say, V'hoya Zaracha. You can hear it in that tape. But loud, very high voice. And we would say 3 times after the Rebbe. And then the Rebbe would turn around. That was the 4th nigun after, yes. Shnas Hakel, I don't think he did it Mamalef. Memches, after the Rebbe did Atareis, he did the pasuk in the Haftarah, the second. He maybe has Chameret Tzofed. I forgot the whole pasuk. It finishes with the words Kahal Godel Yashuvu Heina. So Shnas Hakel, which is this year, the Rebbe said that pasuk 3 after he did Ufaratzta 3 times. The Rebbe said the pasuk about Hakel 3 times, and then we sang Ufaratzta. This was the Atareses. Then came Hakafos. The Hakafos, the Rebbe didn't start the Nigunim. Hakafos, we started the Nigunim, which created a problem. 770 is very big, and every guy in 770, he's the Lubavitcher Rebbe's assistant. So in Minor Yarn, they would push it, give out a list of Nigunim. A piece of paper, they'd circulate it in Shul, and you know what you're going to sing for the second Hakafos, what you're going to sing for the third Hakafos, the fourth Hakafos, because the first and the last was always the same. It was the Rebbe's Hakafos. And there were times that there were 2 groups of people who were there'd be 2 different papers sent out, and that was Babish Amachaya. But those Babish the Lester Payar. But before that, they would send out a piece of paper so you knew what nigun they're going to sing by each Hakafos. The Rebbe got the first Hakafa, and the Rebbe got, I don't have much time, so I'm going to leave this for another group. I'm just going to tell you about Kitzer with a couple minutes that I have left. The Rebbe danced with his brother. I'm going to go through the details of this with the other group, and if you want to get them, I'll be happy to send them to you. The Rebbe danced with his brother, with the Rashag. The Rebbe had the Sefer Torah that belonged to the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe was physically ill. They got the Frierdiker Rebbe a very small Sefer Torah, which had a blue curtain, a blue shirt, a blue mentale, and the Frierdiker Rebbe used to dance with this Sefer Torah in his room. They made Hakafos in the Rebbe's room. The Rebbe danced around his table, around his desk. The Rebbe had that Sefer Torah. The first year or 2, the Rebbe danced with the Sefer Torah, the Frierdiker Rebbe danced with. And then Harav Moshe Ashkenazi, the son of Meir Ashkenazi and the father of Harav Shmuel Ashkenazi of Chabad, purchased what we now call the Rebbe Sefer Torah. That small white Sefer Torah. That Sefer Torah is called the Sefer Torah of Mesiras Nefesh. It belonged to the Slavita brothers. He paid for it twice. Don't ask. He paid for it twice. And the Rebbe wanted it. The Rebbe wanted it, but the Rebbe didn't want to pay for it. He was a jeweler, but he wasn't a multi-millionaire. He was Mesiras Nefesh. He bought the Sefer Torah for the Rebbe. The Rebbe as a gift. And the Rebbe took it, and the Rebbe immediately stopped using the Sefer Torah with which the Frierdiker Rebbe danced. and started using this. This is the Rebbe Sefer Torah. You understand? The Rebbe had his own. The Rashag had the Sefer Torah that belonged to the Frierdiker Rebbe. From this time this Sefer Torah arrived, the Rashag danced with that small blue one. And the Rebbe had his own. In other words, this is a case where the Rebbe had the Sefer Torah from the Frierdiker Rebbe. Someone purchased the Rebbe's Sefer Torah. The Rebbe considered his own personal Sefer Torah. That Sefer Torah that the Rebbe danced with. That Sefer Torah that we kiss. That Sefer Torah, whenever there were two kriyas, they used it for maftir. It has a beautiful crown that matches the big crown from Mashiach Sefer Torah. Mashiach Sefer Torah is a gorgeous crown made of a combination of gold and silver. That small Sefer Torah is also, it's made to look matching. A small crown that also made of gold and silver. Harav Meisha Ashkenazi, who lived in Eretz Yisrael, in Tel Aviv, he purchased Sefer Torah. He bought the mitzpachas, the shirt, and every few years he brought the Rebbe a new one. He has an unbelievable schus. I think it came Tishrei time. The Rebbe was asking for it. The Rebbe wanted it to arrive on time, and as soon as that Sefer Torah arrived, the Rebbe stopped using the Sefer Torah the Frierdiker Rebbe used, and he started using this Sefer Torah. You could legitimately call that Sefer Torah the Rebbe's own. The Rashag and the Rebbe used to hold the Sefer Torah in their left hand, and they placed their right hand on each other's respective shoulders. They danced a place of a place in a circle. And the Rashag used to look at the ceiling, straight up. He was hard for him. Rashag became the Rebbe's biggest chassid. In the beginning, he wanted to be a Rebbe, but he mamish was ibn. By the time Rashag died, he was a full-fledged chassid of the Rebbe. So he would look at the ceiling. Try going around in a circle looking at the ceiling. Within 3 revolutions, the room starts spinning the other way. After 6 revolutions, the room starts to spin like a spin cycle on a while. So the Rebbe's Hakafos was very short, because Rashag would get dizzy. But then there was a few years, which I'll explain to the next group, that the Rashag wasn't there. And the Rebbe danced himself. And then the nicest Hakafos, the longest Hakafos, was the Rebbe's own. I will continue this with the next group. I'll be happy to give you a copy.